Yeah, so let's start with the instincts. Remember that the instincts are a double-edged sword. We talked about this in Tarot 8 with the lion symbolism, because the instincts are there to keep us alive. But if we get too oriented to them, they can actually be damaging. For example, to protect your territory can make someone who's unconsciously aligned with that instinct very territorial, and that can lead to stress and relationships. The instinct to procreate is one that men have a very hard time with, because we're in a Judeo-Christian culture where we say till death do we part, but research shows that 51% of married couples are having extramarital affairs at any given time. Till death do we part has to come face to face with the reality that research shows that the average marriage today only lasts 2.5 years, and the average person's married 3 times, which means these Christians are all worried they're going to burn in hell because they did not fulfill their marriage vows, and God's watching. The instinct to eat, the instinct to poop, to move, all of these instincts can be subverted by digital realities, by chasing money, by drugs, by bad food. To give you an example of how an instinct can be very dangerous, the instinct to eat is often is really meant for the animal to eat the food it needs to keep itself healthy and alive. But in the human being, because of the complex nature of the psyche and our cerebral cortex, which rises above the limbic and the reptilian system and can get us in as much trouble as it does us good, we often eat thinking we're hungry, not realizing we're trying to fill an emotional deficit or a mental deficit. So if a person doesn't have enough conscious awareness that what they're really hungry for is emotional connection, food becomes the surrogate. If we're hungry for mental stimuli and mental growth, and we don't realize that's where it's coming from, we can try to eat to fill our mind. Both of those lead to health problems and obesity. So what I'm trying to point out is that our instincts work well in an animal because they don't have a cerebral cortex. But once you get a cerebral cortex, you now have a very, very complex overlay of belief systems and programming that distorts the actual message of the reptilian and the mammalian brain, which is a survival mechanism. So what is there to survive, help us survive, actually destroys us. So the two aspects of the instincts, if you don't listen to them, you're going to have a health crisis of some kind, because they're there to keep you alive. Remember, your health appraisal questionnaire is an analysis of the health of the autonomically regulated systems of the body. So the more high scores you have, the more out of touch with the instincts that person is. That shows you how much stress our survival systems are under. So the more high scores, the closer to a disease or death somebody is, because the system's capacity to regulate is maxed out. So it means the system's being pushed to the very threshold of its capacity to keep that person alive. Now, if you've seen many clients, just ask yourself what percentage of your charts, when you graph them out, have a lot of high scores. And so that just goes to show you how out of touch with instincts people are. So they're there to keep us alive, but if we aren't careful, they're also what drives us to behaviors that ruin us. Because of the cerebral cortex and the programming factor, which is why the hangman lesson is so critical today, which is why I said God sleeps in the minerals, dreams in the plant, moves in the animals, and realizes himself in man. Because if you don't integrate those stages, which shows up right in Gebser's stages of consciousness, archaic, magic, mythic, mental. If you rise up to mental, but you lose touch with the mineral, archaic, the magic, plant kingdom, the mythic, the animal kingdom, then you become a person whose ideas will kill the animal that they call a body and will kill the planet that they live on, which is exactly what's going on. When it comes to the sexual aspect of it, my biggest tip for you is to stay in the now, because everything that's haunting you is in the past. So if you are having sexual intimacy and you feel these old traumas raising their head, one, say, I'm not done with my healing yet. So I need, that doesn't mean you stop having sex with that person. It just means I need to now do the positive hangman and really go deeper into my unconscious and my programming. And that's, I mapped a lot of that work out for you in the principle of the 8-10 lesson. But the best thing to do is bring yourself into the present moment. What am I smelling? What am I tasting? What am I feeling? What am I looking at? Because as long as you're in the present, you cannot be overwhelmed by the past. You actually have to let the past impinge upon the present moment, which means that part of you is not there. It shows you that you're not actually living in the present, which is called driving with your eyes in the rearview mirror. It's a great way to crash. So if you catch yourself in the rearview mirror, bring yourself into the present by saying to yourself inside, right, what am I feeling right now? I mean, with the sex, I'm feeling pleasure, or I'm being touched, or I'm being kissed. Bring yourself into the moment so that you're really aware of what's happening in the moment. And as long as you're in the moment, you cannot be overtaken by the past or the future. Sex is actually a very deep spiritual practice if it's used that way. Just, namaste means I honor the divine in you. I worship the divine in you. I see God. So if sex is an act of namaste, it is an act of honoring and worshiping the divine that is before you. So as long as you stay in the act of worship and you keep it as a spiritual practice, it helps keep the voice of the trauma at bay, because then it becomes a sacramental act of worship, just like we pray to the mushrooms before we take them and we have an altar. So if the bed becomes the altar of worshiping, then it takes it from just being a sex act into a sacred practice, which is why there is a sexual component to Tantra. That's what it's for.